Okay, this is Orlando Wilson, and what I'm going to talk about in this video slash podcast, we're putting them out in both formats now, is what to do if you think you're being followed. Now, I just got off the phone with somebody that thinks they're being followed, and there's a good chance they could be because they have a large insurance claim going on. And it wouldn't surprise me if the insurance company has attached private investigators to follow them and make sure they're not lying about their injuries and the claim and everything else. It happens a lot. A lot of times, if people come to me saying they're being followed, the first thing that's going through my mind is they're being paranoid. And this happens in a lot of cases. So what I'm going to discuss here is I'm going to give you a couple of examples and maybe a couple of solutions. Depends on your situation. So the first thing I tell people these days, take it for granted you're being watched, take it for granted you're being followed. Unless there's a threat, unless you're going to be physically harmed, unless you're up to no good, there's nothing to worry about. These days with mobile phones, cell phones, etc., you're being watched and followed all the time. I have people talking to me all the time about privacy apps and this and that, and what if the government's watching them, etc. Well, why does the government want to watch you to start with? And you know what, if you're using a computer, if you're using a smartphone, a cell phone, you're going to be being watched and followed. That's it. Do not use any type of electronic communications if you're worried about being watched and followed, period. That's it. Go off grid. That's your solution. Okay, so the chances are, if you think you're being watched and followed, firstly, you need to work out, do a threat assessment and who's watching and who's following you. Work out the threat, which you should be doing all the time anyway. Is it, for this video, podcast, we'll talk about, is it law enforcement? Is it private investigators? Or is it, say, a stalker? 3 different situations, 3 different scenarios, 3 different solutions, if there is a solution. Also work out what type of surveillance they're going to be using against you. Is it going to be physical surveillance? Have they got into your phone? Or is it going to be bugs, listening devices, etc.? So to start off with, law enforcement. You're going to ask yourself why, if you think you're being watched and followed by law enforcement, why? Obviously you're up to something. Or maybe you're not up to something, but the people you're dealing with are up to something. I know a couple of cases where people have been under surveillance, and that includes mail checks by law enforcement, not because of them, they were squeaky clean, but because of somebody they were dealing with that happened to be more than dirty. I'll give you one quick story. I know somebody in the US, they were providing security for somebody that was put on a close protection job, and this person, very capable person, I know him personally, very professional, out driving around, finished his shift for the day, going home, and people are taking photographs of him, overtly taking photographs of him with Gucci cameras, big cameras. So he's not somebody to overreact. His weapon was always cocked. I take it he got out his happy stick, which is the 32 round magazine for a Glock, etc., and was waiting for something to happen. Anyway, he's somebody to think, and he realized he didn't know who he was actually working for on the job. Working for a very wealthy person that had a CP team on him. He done his little bit of due diligence and found out the person, the client that they were working for, that they were put on by a company, was a professional scammer. And we're talking multi-million-dollar scammer. That was under indictment by the feds in the US. He was also scamming in Latin America, everywhere. He'd ripped people for multi-millions of dollars. And he was still living a Gucci lifestyle in the US. The only reason people worked out why he was most probably in the US, because it was safer for him to be in the US, being watched by the FBI, because they wanted to arrest him, than him being out in the big bad world where all the naughty boys he ripped off, or all the people he ripped off, could send the naughty boys to, how can I put it, give him a full body massage with, say, half a kilo hammers, blow torches, chisels, and the like. I'm sure you get the picture. So the thing is, with that type of job, and I'm going to talk about that in another video, saying working for criminal clients, so follow us along and I'll talk about that in detail. But in that situation, the person I know and the other people I knew on that detail came off, because not so much, if everything was done properly and legally, which I'll talk about in another video, they'd have been happy working a job, but the person that put them on the job didn't tell them who they was working for. And if somebody tried to attack that client and they defended that client, they could end up shooting shooting the Fed, US Fed, which would have been horrendous fallout, because they must be going to jail for the rest of their lives. So in that situation, the guys backed off the job. As I said, if you think you're being followed by the police, law enforcement, why? Who are you dealing with that could cause you those problems? If you're into crime, it could be you. Then you need to sort things out or be prepared to be arrested. But if you're a legitimate person running legitimate businesses, you need to ask yourself why. And I'd say distance yourself very quickly from the people you've been dealing with and make sure they've not caught you up in any way with their dirty dealings. Okay, private investigators. As I said, private investigators do follow and watch people for insurance companies, etc. Spouses. If you think you're being watched and followed by private investigators, if there's a reason, they have to work within the law. Private investigators do not have any special jurisdictions, anything special that means they can do anything that the regular citizen can't, or can't, etc. They're regular citizens. If you've got private investigators hassling you, harassing you, report them to the police. If you think you're being followed, report them to the police. I had one lady approach me not so long ago. She had private investigators, well, most probably, if they were private investigators, in her garden. And I said to her, she lived in a state in the US where it would have been legal for her to confront those guys, run them off her property. If they got aggressive with her, she could have shot them, no problems. Why? It's not just stand your ground law. It's because if she was in fear for her safety, she had the right to defend herself. And from what she was saying, these guys that were most probably tasked by her ex-partner were being a little bit too harassing. Lastly, stalkers, domestics. You got to be extremely careful. If you think you're being stalked by an ex-partner, lover, you have to be very, very careful. The chances are, if you turn up at your local police department and report it, they're going to blow you off. Why? Because they're not interested. Unless there's actually been a physical assault, physical violence, they're not interested. They get those types of calls all the time. Document everything, take pictures, etc., etc. And if it comes to the point of violence, make sure you think you're going to be attacked, go somewhere safe, call the cops, etc. If you're in the US and you're in a state where you can legally arm yourself and get training. But again, with stalkers, keep a log. Last resort, go to a lawyer if it's going to get to that stage, because lawyers will just take you for a lot of money. There was one case in Florida, just to finish up on this one. A woman was being followed by a disgruntled ex. Called the cops. They said, come to the police station. Went outside. We'll send out an officer. She went to the police station. She was being followed. She pulled up outside the police station. Her disgruntled ex followed her there, killed her outside of the police station, shot her up in the car. So this is where, in such situations as stalkers and domestics, you need to be very careful. And I would suggest you get professional help, professional advice, etc. So, a little video on what to do if you think you're being watched, if you think you're being followed. Follow me along on social media for a lot more tips, advice on surveillance, close protection and personal security. In the meantime, stay safe.